It's funny how we think about encouragement.
Oh, definitely.
Like if you see a kid ace a math test or, I don't know, a colleague solves this massively complex problem at work, the absolute most natural thing in the world is to pat them on the back and say, wow, you are so smart. You're a natural.
Yeah, it feels supportive. It feels like, exactly the right thing to do.
Right. But uh, what if praising someone's intelligence actually alters their brain in a way that makes them perform worse?
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And even crazier, what if giving someone that compliment drastically increases the chances that they will look you in the eye and literally lie to you?
It completely flips our conventional wisdom upside down. I mean, we
Yeah.
think we're building confidence, but we are often building this psychological trap, really, that makes people absolutely terrified of ever making a mistake.
And it doesn't stop with just how we talk to each other either. Think about the IQ test.
Oh, yeah, the ultimate metric.
Culturally, we view the IQ score as this ultimate, unchangeable measure of, like, raw brain power. You get a number, and that number basically defines your ceiling.
Right, you're boxed in.
But the guy who actually invented it, he never intended it to be used that way. Not even close.
It's one of the great historical ironies, honestly. A tool designed to help people grow was essentially weaponized to put them into permanent categories.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at some fascinating excerpts from Dr. Carol S. Dweck's groundbreaking book, Mindset.
It's a total game changer of a book.
It really is. And our mission for today is to explore this one singular, incredibly simple belief about ourselves. It's a belief that permeates literally every facet of your life.
Every single part.
Yeah, we're talking about the unseen operating system running in the background, dictating everything from how you handle getting, say, a parking ticket on a Tuesday, all the way up to how entire billion-dollar corporations just collapse overnight.
And it all comes down to the psychological foundation of how we view our own human qualities. In the source material, Dr. Dweck outlines these two very distinct worlds you can live in.
Right, the two mindsets.
Exactly. The first is the fixed mindset. This is the belief that your qualities, so your intelligence, your personality, even your moral character, they are carved in stone.
You got what you get.
Right. You are dealt a certain hand of cards at birth, and that's it. And if you believe that, it creates this really intense, constant urgency to prove yourself. Every situation is a test of your permanent intelligence. You always have to look smart.
Because, I mean, if you fail at something and your abilities are completely fixed, then the failure isn't just a thing that happened. You're a failure.
Exactly. It becomes your identity. But the second world is the growth mindset. This is the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate and develop through effort, strategy, and help from others.
It doesn't mean anyone can become Einstein just by trying really hard.
No, not at all. But it means your true potential is fundamentally unknown. You can stretch beyond your current abilities. And what's fascinating here is that Alfred Binet, the actual inventor of the IQ test, he was firmly in this growth camp.
I still can't get over that fact.
Yeah.
It honestly feels like finding out the guy who invented the stop sign actually meant for it to mean go faster.
Right. It's so counterintuitive now. But Binet was a Frenchman working in Paris in the early 20th century, and the public schools were trying to figure out what to do with children who were falling behind.
Okay.
He didn't design the IQ test to rank children by some unchangeable innate intelligence. He designed it to identify kids who were struggling so that the schools could design completely new educational programs to get them back on track.
Wow.
Yeah, he fully believed practice and training could literally alter a person's intelligence over time.
So he was trying to find the starting line for their growth, not the finish line of their potential.
Beautifully put,
Yeah.
yes.
To see how these two mindsets play out in real life, the text offers this brilliant thought experiment. So imagine you're a young adult and you're just having a really bad day.
We've all been there.
Right. You go to a class you love, you get your midterm back, and it's a C+ beat. Then on the way home, you find a parking ticket on your windshield.
Ugh, the worst.
And then, frustrated, you call your best friend Event, and they kind of just brush you off and end the call.
So, a frustrating Tuesday, but objectively not a tragedy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when Dweck asked people with a fixed mindset how they would react to this exact scenario, their responses were catastrophic.
They really were.
They said things like, I'm a loser, I'm an idiot, the world is out to get me, or, somebody upstairs doesn't like me. A C+ world, a parking ticket, and a rushed phone call turned into this total, devastating indictment of their worth as a human being.
Because in that fixed world, Every single event is a direct measurement of your competence. There's no separation between, I got a bad grade and I am fundamentally inadequate.
Right. It's a direct hit.
And the way they cope with that trauma is by retreating. In the study, these people said they'd stop studying, stay in bed, get drunk, or, pick a fight.
Just totally check out. But the people with the growth mindset looked at the exact same scenario and simply saw a list of problems to be solved.
It was purely practical for them.
Yeah, they said, I need to look at what I got wrong and study harder for the next test, pay the ticket, and check if my friend is having a bad day. They don't attach the events to their identity at all.
No, they detach completely.
It reminds me of playing a video game where your character's health bar can never regenerate. If every hit you take is permanent damage, you naturally avoid all the difficult boss fights. You just stay in the safe zones where you know you won't get hurt.
That is a perfect analogy, and you can actually see that safe zone avoidance happening at a neurological level.
Wait, really? Neurologically?
Yes. Researchers at Columbia University brought people into a brainwave lab. They asked some hard questions and monitored their brain activity. For the people with a fixed mindset, their brainwaves only showed intense attention when they were being told if they were right or wrong.
So, just the threat assessment.
Exactly.
Right.
But the moment they were given information that could actually explain the right answer and help them learn, total flatline.
Wow. Their brain literally shut down the moment the judgment was over. They didn't care about the lesson. They only cared about the verdict.
Contrast that with the growth mindset group. Their brainwaves lit up for the learning part. They were actively scanning the feedback to stretch their knowledge.
That was wild.
And you see this play out in the real world, too. At the University of Hong Kong, all classes and exams are taught in English. When incoming freshmen who had poor English skills were offered a remedial course to get up to speed, the growth mindset students emphatically said yes.
Makes sense.
They recognized a skill gap and took action. But the fixed mindset students overwhelmingly refused the help.
They were so terrified of exposing their deficiency that they were willing to risk failing out of college entirely. They chose the safe zone over the boss fight.
Exactly.
And the stakes of this go way beyond college courses. The text contrasts two incredible stories of how people process failure. First, there's Jim Marshall, a former defensive player for the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, this story is unbelievable.
Right. In a game against the 49ers, he scooped up a fumble and ran it all the way for a touchdown. The only problem was he got turned around. He ran the wrong way and scored for the opposing team on national television.
It is the pinnacle of public humiliation. It's the kind of mistake you assume someone would just never recover from.
But at halftime, Marshall realized he had a choice. He didn't label himself a failure. He went back out, played some of the most aggressive, brilliant football of his life, and actually helped his team win that game.
Talk about a comeback.
And later, he used that shameful experience to speak to groups and answer letters from people who were paralyzed by their own mistakes. He took control of the narrative.
He really did. But on the tragic extreme of the fixed mindset, we have Bernard Loiseau.
Yeah, this one is tough.
He was one of the top chefs in the world, running a restaurant in France with the supreme 3-star rating from the Michelin Guide, but he was deeply possessed by the fixed mindset. His entire sense of self was tied to that rating.
His whole identity.
Yes. When rumors started circulating, and I mean they were just rumors, that he might lose one of his 3 stars, he couldn't handle the perceived threat to his identity. He tragically committed suicide.
It's heartbreaking. He tied his entire human value to a label, which brings up a massive question.
That's that.
Well, if the fixed mindset avoids difficult things because trying hard implies you aren't naturally talented, how do we explain the world's greatest geniuses and athletes? Society just loves to push this narrative that the true greats just woke up one day with superpowers.
Oh, we have a total cultural obsession with the myth of the natural. We love the idea of effortless accomplishment because it's magical.
Like Thomas Edison. The image we have of Edison is this lone wizard standing in a dark room and suddenly, ding, the light bulb just pops into his head, fully formed.
The historical reality destroys that myth completely. The sources point out that Edison had 30 assistants. He operated a state-of-the-art, heavily funded corporate laboratory.
So not a lone wizard.
Not at all. The light bulb wasn't one sudden epiphany. It was a grueling network of time-consuming, frustrating, iterative inventions. He wasn't magical. He was just relentlessly curious and possessed an unbelievable tolerance for failure.
And the same is true for artistic talent, right?
Yeah.
We just assume you either have the eye for art or you completely don't.
Right. The author mentions a famous drawing course by Betty Edwards to disprove this. She took a group of people with seemingly zero artistic talent, like adults whose drawings looked like primitive, awkward stick
Like
figures.
my drawings, basically.
Right. But Edwards didn't teach them how to be talented. She taught them mechanics. She taught them seeing skills. So, how to perceive edges, negative spaces, and the relationship between light and shadow.
Is breaking it down.
Exactly. And in just 5 days of applying these strategies, these supposedly untalented people were drawing absolutely stunning, lifelike self-portraits.
5 days. 5 days to completely rewrite what they thought was a permanent lack of ability. And when we look at the physical naturals, the sports world is full of these myths too.
Oh, definitely.
But the mechanisms behind their success are entirely based on the growth mindset. Like Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school varsity team is famous, but what's actually important is how he processed it.
Right. He didn't just give up.
He didn't decide he was fundamentally flawed.
Hmm.
He viewed the rejection as actionable data. He identified specific skill gaps and just spent hours practicing to close them.
Muhammad Ali is another perfect example of this. Ali actually failed all the classic physical measurements for a heavyweight boxer, the tails of the tape.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He didn't have the classic strength or the standard moves. When he fought Sonny Liston, Liston was a physical monster. But Ali didn't try to outmuscle him. He used a growth mindset to study Liston's mind.
That's brilliant.
He realized Liston was a bully, and bullies panic when they can't dominate early. Ali turned a physical brawl into a psychological puzzle, just surviving the early rounds until Liston's mind broke.
So it wasn't raw talent. It was pure strategy and effort. Or, like Wilma Rudolph, hailed as the fastest woman on Earth. She was actually paralyzed by polio as a child and wore a leg brace until she was 12.
Unbelievable.
She had to endure grueling physical therapy just to walk, let alone run. These people stretched themselves beyond the bounds of what seemed naturally possible.
And that contrasts so sharply with the prodigies who relied solely on their gift. The text brings up Nadja Solano Sonnenberg, the brilliant violin prodigy.
Oh, this story is crazy.
Her entire identity was wrapped up in being a natural genius. When she got to Juilliard and faced real competition, she was so terrified of losing her label that she actually stopped practicing.
She just quit trying.
She wouldn't even bring her violin to lessons. Her subconscious logic was basically, if she didn't try and failed, she had an excuse. But if she tried her hardest and still failed, she would be exposed as a fraud.
It's the exact same mechanism that trapped Billy Beane, the baseball phenom. He was considered a pure natural, the next Babe Ruth, but he had absolutely no concept of how to process failure.
None at all.
Every time he struck out, he threw a tantrum and his mechanics just fell apart. He stayed trapped by his own talent because the idea of practicing away his deficiencies felt like an admission that he wasn't perfect.
Right. But when you embrace effort instead of running from it, the results can frankly defy logic. The actor Christopher Reeve is a profound example.
Right, Superman.
Yeah. After being completely paralyzed from the neck down in a horse riding accident, traditional medical science told him to simply come to terms with his permanent condition. Instead, he initiated a demanding, relentless exercise program using electrical stimulation.
Which doctors thought was pointless.
Completely pointless. But 5 years later, he started to regain movement. He defied scientific consensus because his mindset absolutely refused to accept his current physical state as the absolute finish line.
Okay, wait. If the fixed mindset hates effort, how do you explain the high-powered, fast-track workaholics who work 80 hours a week, the people grinding to make millions or win awards? They are clearly putting in a massive amount of effort.
That is a crucial distinction to make. It's true that fixed mindset people generally prefer effortless success, but those high-powered individuals you mentioned are expending massive effort, yet their underlying mechanism is still completely fixed.
Also.
Their goal isn't to learn or grow. Their goal is to validate their superiority. They are grinding 80 hours a week to win a Nobel Prize or become the CEO specifically so they can prove they are fundamentally better than everyone else.
Okay.
Because their ego is still on the line, they remain highly intolerant of criticism, mistakes, or setbacks. The effort is just a tool to buy validation.
So the motivation is entirely different. They're still just protecting a fragile identity, which means if effort for validation is toxic, the way we talk about success, the labels we put on people to validate them, must be causing this.
Oh, absolutely.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about how we create this dynamic in the first place.
It starts incredibly early, and it's heavily documented in what's known as the praise study. Researchers took hundreds of early adolescents and gave them a set of fairly difficult nonverbal IQ problems. Most of the kids did well.
Yeah.
Then the researchers divided them into two groups and gave them a single sentence of praise. Group A was praised for their ability. Wow, you got a good score. You must be smart at this. Group B was praised for their effort. Wow, you got a good score. You must have worked really hard.
Just a few subtle words of difference.
Literally one word change.
But the behavioral impact was massive. The kids praised for ability were immediately pushed into a fixed mindset. When the researchers offered them a choice for their next task, the ability-praised kids rejected a challenging new puzzle that they could learn from.
Right, they played it safe.
Specifically because they didn't want to risk looking dumb and losing their new SMART label. But the effort-praised kids, 90% of them eagerly chose the challenging task.
And it gets worse. The researchers then forced all the kids to do some really difficult problems where everyone struggled. The ability-praised kids completely lost their confidence.
It just shattered them.
Yeah. When the researchers gave them a final set of easy problems, their performance plummeted. The effort-praised kids, however, used the hard problems as a learning opportunity, and their performance on the final easy set actually skyrocketed.
And the most shocking part of the entire study is what happened next.
This part is crazy.
The researchers asked the kids to write their scores down on a piece of paper to share with students at another school. Almost 40% of the kids who were praised for their ability looked at the paper and lied.
40%?
They inflated their scores. Just by complimenting their intelligence, the researchers made these kids so desperate to protect their label that they turned into liars.
It perfectly demonstrates the intense, crushing burden of a positive label. The text highlights the composer Adam Guettel, grandson of the legendary Richard Rodgers. He was labeled a genius his entire life.
A lot to live up to.
Exactly. But that label didn't empower him. It left him riddled with obsessive-compulsive tics and a deep, paralyzing fear of failure. He admitted that in his family, to be very good is to fail. You either produce sheer perfection or you are nothing.
I can completely relate to that pressure on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
I remember getting a D on a history project in middle school, and I literally hid the paper in my backpack for a week because I was supposed to be the smart kid.
It's exhausting trying to maintain that.
It is. It's like being handed a priceless, fragile glass trophy. You're told it's your most valuable possession.
Yeah.
You spend your whole life carrying it around, completely terrified of dropping and shattering your identity.
Yes.
And because both your hands are busy holding this fragile trophy, you can't actually do any real messy hard work.
That is the exact mechanism. You become a protector instead of a producer. And negative labels work in a very similar, restrictive way. Claude Steele's research on negative stereotypes explores this beautifully.
Oh, right, the stereotype threat.
Take the stereotype that women are bad at math or African Americans are bad at academics. Steele found that these stereotypes can literally hijack a person's performance by eating up their cognitive bandwidth.
Because their brain is running a background program.
Exactly. If you are in a fixed mindset, taking a test in a stereotype subject fills your mind with distracting worries about confirming that negative label. You are trying to solve a math problem while simultaneously fighting off the thought, what if they're right about me?
Wow.
You literally have less mental RAM available to actually solve the problem.
But the growth mindset strips the stereotype of its power. There's a great story in the text about African-American students who received incredibly harsh, condescending feedback on an essay from an Ivy League professor named Edward Caldwell III.
Yeah, he was notoriously tough.
The students with a fixed mindset understandably got defensive. They dismissed him as biased and arrogant, but as a result, they didn't improve their writing.
The students with the growth mindset looked at the exact same harsh feedback and took a completely different approach. They acknowledged the professor's arrogance, but they decided to use him.
They flipped the script.
They saw his criticism as a mechanical tool to improve their essays. They basically recruited the critic, they were there to get an education, and they refused to let his label or his attitude stop them from taking the knowledge they needed to grow.
They refused to let his assessment be their finish line. Okay, so we've seen how these labels destroy individual potential and cause us to hide history projects in backpacks.
Right.
But what happens when that frightened office worker mentality scales up to the C-suite? What happens when an entire multi-billion-dollar organization builds its culture around the fragile glass trophy of the genius label?
Well, you get the catastrophic collapse of Enron.
One of the most infamous corporate disasters in history.
Enron's entire culture was built on what management consultants at the time called the talent mindset. They literally worshipped innate talent. They aggressively recruited people with fancy degrees and paid them massive salaries just for being perceived as brilliant.
Which sounds good on paper, maybe.
But by doing this, they inadvertently created a toxic environment where everyone had to look and act like an infallible genius every single day.
And if you have to be a genius every day, you can never ask for help.
They couldn't admit to any flaws. When you have an environment that esteems people strictly for their innate talent, they can't stand up to investors and admit a strategy isn't working. They can't self-correct.
Because that would mean they aren't geniuses.
Exactly. They'd sooner cook the books and lie. That deeply ingrained inability to admit deficiencies is what eventually destroyed the entire company.
But wait, I have to ask. Saving a massive company or leading a huge turnaround takes an unbelievable amount of confidence, right? Is it always bad for a CEO to be a charismatic superhero? Are we saying confidence is the enemy?
That's where Jim Collins' research in his book, Good to Great, provides so much clarity. Collins looked at companies that leaped from being merely good to truly great over a long period.
Okay.
The leaders of those successful companies were not the typical charismatic, egomaniacal superheroes we see on magazine covers. They were actually quite self-effacing. Charisma isn't the problem. The problem is the fixed mindset need for validation.
Ah, so it's about whether their confidence is rooted in learning or in ego.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can look at the contrast between Lee Iacocca at Chrysler and Alan Wurtzel at Circuit City.
Oh, this is a great comparison.
Iacocca was a classic fixed mindset leader. He achieved a brilliant early turnaround, but then he became obsessed with his own image. He fired his critics. When Japanese automakers started beating American cars, instead of looking at the data and making better cars, he threw tantrums and demanded the government impose tariffs to protect his market share.
He just wanted to protect his throne.
Exactly. He stopped innovating and started defending. Meanwhile, Alan Wurtzel called himself a plow horse. He would hold massive debates in his boardroom just to learn from his team.
Just to figure things out.
Yeah, he acted like a bulldog, constantly asking his executives why, until he fully understood a problem. He didn't care about looking like the smartest guy in the room. And he took Circuit City from near bankruptcy to delivering the highest total return to stockholders on the New York Stock Exchange.
That's amazing.
And we can see this dynamic proven in laboratory settings as well. Researchers Wood and Bandura had business students run a simulated furniture company.
Like a management game.
Right. The students who were primed with a growth mindset, meaning they were told that management is a dynamic skill you develop, used the feedback from their early mistakes to continuously adjust their strategy and improve productivity.
They learned as they went.
But the students given a fixed mindset, so they were told that the simulation measured their underlying permanent leadership capacity, they completely failed to profit from their mistakes. Their productivity plummeted because they were too busy protecting their egos.
They wanted to be worshipped as naturals, not partner as learners. So what does this all mean? We've traveled from avoiding a parking ticket to the collapse of Enron, and from Michael Jordan's high school gym to an Ivy League essay review.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. And I want to turn this over to you listening right now. Think about the meetings you sit in or the projects you take on. When you hit a wall or when you face a setback, how do you interpret it? Do you view it as a permanent label of your failure?
Do you hide the test in the backpack?
Exactly. Or do you see it as actionable data, a starting point for your development? Because as Dr. Dweck reminds us, mindsets are just beliefs. And beliefs, no matter how deeply ingrained, can be changed.
And as you think about changing those beliefs, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
If we now know definitively that praising intelligence creates fragile, dishonest learners, and that praising effort creates resilient, unstoppable innovators, what would happen if we completely redesigned our entire educational system around this mechanism? What if schools entirely stopped giving letter grades for final test scores and instead solely graded students on their process, their strategies, and their willingness to tackle the impossible?
Wow. That would fundamentally change how the next generation views their own potential. It really makes you realize that whether you're a student, a CEO, or a parent, you have a daily choice. You can fiercely cling to that fragile glass trophy of natural talent, terrified of breaking it, or you can carefully put it down, roll up your sleeves, and actually get to work. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.